Good morning and welcome to our May virtual session. We're excited to have you today. I'm Yolanda Dillard. I'm one of the chapter leaders. So Britne Jenke, she is a learning and development leader with over 15 years of experience designing, developing, and directing engaging and innovative learning solutions. With a background in web design and educational technology, Britne is passionate about accessibility, disability advocacy, and inclusive design. She was featured in the 2021 DEI podcast that ATD does for her work on designing inclusive training. She was also recognized in 2022 as a winner of the ATD Greater Las Vegas Tribute to Learning Award for Learning Project Management. So with that, let's welcome Britne, and it is her show.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm surprised there is actually another holiday coming up this week. I'm surprised we didn't tie this to Global Accessibility Awareness Day is on Thursday. So if you have not heard of that event, it is a global day recognizing accessibility. And I was sure that was the reason that you brought me to your chapter this week to talk about accessibility for online learning. So let me get my screen share going here. And this is going to be a really fun presentation. So I hope you will all be able to join in. We are using Mentimeter today. If you have not used Mentimeter before, it's very simple and very fun. So scan the QR code, or if you're on a desktop device, you can go to menti.com and enter that code. Once you've logged in, there's a couple features there. So just as everyone's getting situated, there is a persistent Q&A button. So at any point in the conversation we're having, you have Q&A that you want to submit and we'll get to at the end, then absolutely use the Q&A button. If you're more comfortable dropping a question in the Zoom chat, I'm watching the chat there as well. But if you use the Menti, we get to vote on your question. So it's really fun. And then there is a little heart icon in your Menti as well. So if you want to try that out, let me know that you see the heart icon. That lets me know that you found this information useful, new to you. This was a good point. So I get to collect all the hearts at the end, and I get to see which slides you like best. So please heart information that you like in the Menti. That helps me out with the presentation. So now that everyone is logged in, we see some hearts. We've got everyone working here. Welcome to Accessibility for Online Learning. This session I have created for anyone who does anything with online learning. So if you are a designer or a facilitator of virtual training, or if you build e-learning modules, or if you do documents that are used in online environments, a lot of us create PDFs and Word documents and other things like that. So anything online learning is what we're going to talk about today. And there's a subtitle for this session. It doesn't quite fit on the slide, but I used it when I presented this session at ATD Tech Knowledge this year. They let me have a long title. So it was Accessibility for Online Learning, Improve Your Learners' Lives Today. So the reason I called it that is I'm going to give you so many resources by the end of this session that you really will be able to start implementing accessibility today if you choose. And I know that's a big gap for a lot of people when they start learning about accessibility is where do I start? So I want to help you start. And I'm going to give you resources to get started today. So let's jump in. Like any good instructional designer, I have objectives for my session today, but I want to hear from you and let me know what you came to this session for. So I will cover all of these things. I will cover different types of disabilities and assistive technology you might encounter, the challenges that your disabled learners might experience, creating accessible online learning, and then evaluating the things we already have for accessibility, and then convincing others to prioritize accessibility. And if you came here for something else, let me know that too. So please drop that in the Q&A. So I'd like you to vote now on these objectives and let me know where we need to spend our time. Because we have about an hour or so to spend together today, and I want to make sure I get the right resources to you for what you want to learn. So thank you for voting here. We are going to spend time digesting those challenges that learners are facing. And I think with some of the different disabilities, I'm going to call out different situations. You're really going to see the challenges very evidently when you start looking at your online learning materials. So we will talk creating accessible materials from the start and how to evaluate what we already have. I'll give you some of that convincing. Some people do need that, but no one came up with anything else. So, all right. If you do think of anything else, do please let me know in the Q&A. So let's, we did a little introduction of me, but I'll just give you how this relates to accessibility. So I have been in learning and development for quite a long time, probably about 20 years. But I started my career actually as a freelance web developer. I learned how to make web pages when I was a kid because I had a computer because my dad was a tech guy. And so as I learned about making web pages and code and HTML and all of these buzzwords, there was another buzzword about accessibility. And there's a lot of rules and regulations for websites and how they are to interact with assistive technologies. So the way that websites are structured and written should be done certain ways so people with disabilities can access them. And so this was really fascinating. And I was able to kind of take this knowledge into my learning and development career. I went briefly into librarianship, started working on a master's there and then changed my mind. But I worked in physical spaces as well, different types of access to information. And so there's something across, all of these intertwining fields of, websites and, libraries and then, corporate training environments as well. How do we, as the people with the access to the information, make sure that other people get the same access to that information? And that's where accessibility comes in, is making sure that people have access to information. So let's dive into a little bit about the disabilities we might see. Would you be surprised to know that 27% of the US adult population is disabled in some way? We're going to break down the numbers and what that looks like in different types of disabilities, but I'd like you to think about this for a moment in the audience of the people that you are designing your training materials for. So whether this is a workplace or a government institution, in your audience, how many people do you think are disabled? So I'll let you take a vote here. I've called this, disabled in the workplace, because a lot of us are in a corporate training environment, or our audience is a workforce of some kind. So of those, how many do you think are disabled? Now, I'm going to give you a little hint, and I'm seeing the votes start to come in. If 27% of US adults are disabled, we may not see more than that in the workplace. But I have had someone surprise me with this question actually and voted 100% because they did work at a place of employment that employed only people with disabilities. So someone got me on that question right there. But we're seeing some votes here, and I'm going to reveal what the correct answer is and then how I got that. So would it surprise you to know that only 5% of people in the workforce are disabled? Now, how did we get there? This is a survey done last year. This is the self-identification rate of disabled people in the workforce. So this is people who will, on a demographic survey in their workplace, say, yes, I am disabled. This has nothing to do with the EEOC data collection, like when you apply for a job and it asks you if you're disabled. That is different data collection. This is simply any internal demographic survey that comes out where they're asking employees about maybe their race, gender, other demographic information of people that identify with disabilities. It's only 5%. Now, there's a lot of reason for that. There's a lot of stigma surrounding disability in the workplace, and a lot of workplaces just aren't set up for people with disabilities. So they may not actually be successfully employed there. But I have a few more statistics for you, just putting it back in perspective. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released earlier this year that 22.5% of disabled people are employed. So that contrasts with about 65% of the non-disabled population is employed. So we're still seeing a disparity, but we're seeing more than that 5% number there. Another study I have from 2017 talks more about how people with disabilities talk to others about their disability in the workplace. So about 39% of people will tell their direct manager that they have a disability. About 24% will inform the rest of their teammates that they have a disability. So when it comes to working with the people with that disability in the workplace, it helps to inform the rest of the team different accommodations that need to be made. When it comes to official accommodations with HR, only about 21% of employees will disclose. So we're seeing that disparity change based on, where the data is being collected from, who's asking and why. All of this kind of comes together to paint a picture that there are a lot more disabled people in our workplaces than we may already think. And we need to really prioritize accessibility for all of us. So a quick overview, types of those disabilities that we might be seeing. About 5% of the adult population has some kind of blindness. This does include color blindness and low vision, so not always complete blindness. Same with about 6% have a hearing deficit of some sort, so maybe complete deafness, may also just be some degree of hearing loss. 12% of the population has some kind of motor impairment, and 13% has a cognitive impairment. Now, math is not my strong suit. I do know this does not add up to 27%. Somebody called that out. Some people do have more than one disability. So some of these categories may overlap for some people. But when you think about disabilities, are you only thinking about permanent conditions? What about other temporary conditions that could be affecting the audience that you are designing your training materials for? So I always see hearts on this slide. That one's okay. You can heart it. I'll give you a link to download this image later. But this is an image from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit that pulls out some examples of temporary and situational disabilities. And I'd like to give an example here from my own experience. I was able to implement an accessibility practice at an unconventional way because I was able to help those that were temporarily or situationally disabled. So I was designing training for workers in a factory. They had little videos to watch, which was great when they were in a quiet environment. But their managers often said, hey, your machine's down, go catch up on your training real fast. So they had to watch training videos on their mobile devices when every other machine around them was running except theirs. So we needed to do things like captions and transcripts for our videos so that people could hear them when they were temporarily or situationally disabled from their hearing. In this really loud production floor, they were trying to sneak in a quick training video of that latest safety tip that they had to get down and check off, and whatever was the next important training needed to be done, but they couldn't always get to a quiet environment to do it. So something like this helps you put some of those accessibility features in a different frame of reference. I know some of you wanted to know particularly about some of the assistive technology, and these are different things that I've seen in workplaces or that I have had to design training with these pieces of technology in mind. So these are some of the most common things that you are going to see in a modern workplace or environment, school environment, university as well. So the first one is either a screen reader or a text-to-speech software. These do similar things, but they're quite different. Text-to-speech software, you can select a passage of text and have it read back to you. This is great if you have motor control and vision and are able to select that passage of text to have it be read to you. So this helps people with conditions like dyslexia, that they may have trouble reading long paragraphs of text, but may better process that information in auditory format. Now, a screen reader will also read out text to speech, but a screen reader is a very sophisticated piece of software that lets a blind user completely navigate a web page, computer, software, other electronic environment. So it performs all navigation functions as well as speech output. So much more sophisticated. I'm going to show you a free screen reader that you can download for Windows, Mac. You've already got one built in. We'll talk about that. But you can test things with a screen reader yourself if you want to see what that software is like. Input-output alternatives. So these are things that we commonly see as in like ergonomic keyboards or maybe a mouse with a trackball wheel instead of a full scroll. I've seen things like a foot pedal for an input device instead of using hand motion. So different types of input-output devices that might interact with the computer that the learner is using to then perform their training exercise. Display enhancement tools. These are things like color contrast tools for colorblind users being able to change the screen colors on their device. For vision-assisted users, having magnification devices that let them zoom either parts of a screen or the entire screen. And then a lot of these are actually built into operating systems these days. So we've come a long way with assistive technology. A lot of these used to be separate devices or separate software that people had to buy or install. Now a lot of them are built into Windows, into the Mac iOS, even into our mobile devices. So within the Android platform and the mobile iOS, there are so many accessibility features. So I say all of this to caution you that your users might already be interacting with your content using some of these assistive technologies that are built into their devices. So just to be aware of all of those different platforms and variations that might exist. All right, so I've talked for quite a bit there. I want to hear from you. What disabilities or assistive technology have you encountered in your workplace, in your audience, that you design your training for, or that you are working with on a daily basis? So kind of what are we seeing commonly, or of all of those things that I called out to you, what do you say that, yes, I do remember someone had a foot pedal or someone had a different assistive device? We have people with vision impairments, hard of hearing. These are actually, the most common because they happen to all of us as we age. Any of us can lose our eyesight, need reading glasses, need bifocals. We can lose our hearing at any age. There are people that are even my age with hearing loss from our youth going to concerts. So all of these things can actually be accessibility needs in the workplace. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same things here, and these are the most common ones that we see. So no surprise there. Oh, we have a colorblind one. Yep. I was waiting actually for that one to come up. It's actually some statistics for you here. More males than females are colorblind. And I've seen estimates about 8 to 10% of the male population is colorblind. So about 1 in 10 people. Think of all the men and 1 in 10 of them might be colorblind in some way. I know several, and they're actually all men that are colorblind in my life. So yeah. All right. So what does this really mean for our disabled learners? I know that some of you really wanted to focus on this topic. This really means that everyone has the right to be treated equally, regardless of their ability or disability. So there should be no barriers preventing interaction with any of our digital products. So whether that is an e-learning or a course or a video or a online environment, there should be no barriers for disabled people that don't exist for those of us that aren't disabled. And this is law in a lot of places. So we have laws here in the United States, like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Other countries have several laws as well. I just did a webinar with a global audience, and every country defines things differently under the law and what needs to be accommodated for. So it's a very complex landscape out there. But it really all boils down to access and making sure that everyone has the same access to information and resources. So kind of from talking about the kinds of disabilities there are, the kinds of assistive tech, and now you're probably thinking how we apply this to learning. So that's where we're going to jump next. But I want to make sure if you have a question here about the laws, about access and things, we can talk that later at the end. So drop your question in the Q&A. But really, let's tie this all together. Let's think about all of those kinds of disabilities, kinds of assistive tech, and all the laws we have to follow. And let's really talk about creating accessible online learning. So another quick brainstorm from you, again, drop in the Zoom chat or the Menti chat, but let's talk about particularly what you came here for. What interactive elements of your online learning are you concerned that may or may not be accessible? So the common ones I see, of course, we have video, we have a PDF, we've got surveys, questions, lots of forms to fill out. We don't know if those are accessible. You can add as many things as you want here on this Menti slide, so don't get carried away. Just add the first few top of mind for you. And let me know what particularly you want to fix or for accessibility in your online learning. Because I'm going to jump next to some quick fixes that apply to a lot of things, but then we're going to have a discussion particularly about anything tricky that you came up with.
I was going to say it was more than a word, so it wouldn't let me type it all. But
oh no,
basic design considerations. I don't know if that's part of this, but just like what things we should be keeping in mind when we begin our design.
Yes, that's where I'm jumping next with like kind of my top. Say maybe top 5, and then we'll expand that into a little checklist that's got maybe your top fixes for everything. But we have, I always want we can talk about it. My favorite one to talk about is drag and drops. So how do you make something that you drag and drop accessible to someone who maybe doesn't have full motor movement? So we can talk about that one if drag and drop comes up on the list. But polling questions, oh, and then doing a color palette specifically with color blindness in mind. We're going to talk about some color checking tools. All right. No one dropped drag and drop in there. You might get me to talk about it. Drag and drops are my big pet peeve. All right, let's talk some very quick design wins. I think this is where everyone is going to want to start. These are the things that you can apply to anything you're doing. So whether you're building an e-learning module or a PDF or doing a virtual training, these are some of your best practices to apply all of the time. The first one is alt text or alternative text. This is what replaces an image or a video for a screen reader. If they are unable to see what is that, the image, video, whatever the multimedia you have, alt text will be the text alternative for that content. We're going to practice writing alt text here in a minute so you can see what it's like to really describe an image for a screen reader. But this also has another use as well. So if you've ever been to a web page that loads really slowly, if you maybe got bad internet connection or your a mobile device and data's cutting out, the alt text will actually load first in place of the image. And then you can decide if you want to use the rest of that bandwidth to download the rest of that, or if you've actually got what you need from reading the alt text. So helps people, again, not just with disabilities, but in other conditions as well. The next one is color contrast. I will give you some tools to check color contrast. And there are some rules out there, ratios between colors that are best for people with various conditions of blindness and color blindness. So there's guidelines for that. I know a lot of people always ask, I have to use my corporate color palette. What do I do? There are ways that you can maybe combine some different colors out of your palette that have different ratios than maybe what you've been told to use. Maybe you can do things like using white, black, gray backgrounds to your colors, if that's allowed in your palette. So we can talk about creative ways to talk to the design team about accessibility if that's a concern of yours. But usually there is a way to mix and match your colors that make an accessible ratio, and I'll give you some tools for that. The next one is captions and transcripts. So this is, anything that you have in audio or video form that is coming across that needs some kind of description for those without hearing or vision. So we have captions should be enabled in your Zoom if you'd like to try. You can even add captions as you're talking in the Zoom meetings. You can add them after the fact. There are a lot of ways to auto-generate your captions these days. Even YouTube, you upload a video and it will auto-generate captions for you. So there's really no excuse to not include captions. And then transcripts as well. So providing a full text transcript that has, speakers identified and any important audio visual cues that are happening. Again, for those without that vision or hearing, making sure they get all of the same access to information as someone with full enablement of those senses. Readability. This is one that gets overlooked a lot when it comes to people with cognitive disabilities. We sometimes get a lot of information from our SMEs that is, it's a lot of text and it's a lot of information. And we need to kind of regurgitate that back to our learners in the most accessible way. And one way to do that is really readability. So making sure that your audience, we always shoot for maybe like the lowest 20% of your audience's reading level. So whatever that might be for your population. And I'll give you a tool to check readability here later, one of my favorites. But there, again, automated tools, drop a paragraph of text and it'll tell you how to break that up and make it a little bit more readable for your audience. So again, people with cognitive processing disorders, things like dyslexia, this can really improve accessibility of your materials if you're just concentrating on readability. And along with readability, so again, that's things like the structure of what we're writing. Then there's the navigation of what we're writing. And this is one that often gets overlooked, and I want to call it out in particular. So if you're doing something like creating an e-learning module or a document, make sure that you are defining things like headers and sections and paragraph text and little asides and whatever those different text components are. They all have structural elements to someone who is using a screen reader or other assistive technology. They need to know how to navigate around that page and understand what's important and what goes in what order. So I know some people tend to use, body text for everything and then just change the size and the, font weight and, but it's still set as body text underneath. If you're not using those defined, headers, sections, that your document or your creation software really allows you to define those structural elements. It lets you do that for a reason, and that is for these assistive technologies. So making sure that as you're using this creation software, you're not just, body text for everything, we'll fix it later. Let's really think about how we're structuring things for navigation for an assistive technology user, as well as making it readable, concise, and easy to get through for cognitive purposes as well. All right, lots of little hearts there. I loved it. These are probably like the top tips that if you can, keep these top of mind as you're designing, you're going to fix a lot of the major accessibility challenges that learners might face. We're going to, for anyone who designs e-learning, I want to keep this moving, so I don't want to show this video, but I want to link you to it. And I'll give you the link at the end as well. This is from ATD's Toolbox Tips. It's a great little video about why you should optimize e-learning for screen readers. So it's really, if you haven't played with things like focus order and the different objects in Storyline and how those might get output to someone using assistive tech, this is a great little, I think it's like 6-minute watch. Diane Elkins, she's wonderful, but really go through that. She shows you how it looks to a screen reader before optimized and then after optimized. So you can really compare. Great little video there. But let's do another fun activity for us. I told you that we would practice writing some alt text. So first, let's talk about what makes alt text good or bad for someone who needs alt text for their assistive technology. I have here 2 example alt texts for the same image. One reads a hot air balloon. The other reads a black and rainbow striped hot air balloon floats against a light blue sky. So I'll let you consider the 2 of those and perhaps vote there on which is your favorite. But let's talk about alt text a bit. So alt text, one thing that always gets asked is, does it need to be completely objective? Does it need to describe factually what's in the image? And I would always counter and say, not necessarily. You are the one that maybe chose that image for your design, whether it's in a document, in e-learning, something on a slide in a virtual class. You chose that image for a reason. And if you need to be subjective in how you're describing it, I think that's okay. So things like calling out emotion, instead of, a woman crying. You might say a woman distressed about her workplace situation. You may add context, make it more subjective. You have no idea why that woman is crying in that video, but you can add that subjectivity to your alt text to make it clearer for whoever needs that information. All right, so we have all votes for this one, and I'm going to say both of these alt texts are correct. So neither one is wrong. You might use them in different situations. So I would say if you had a standalone image of this hot air balloon, then all of your choice is correct. If this was the only thing on the page, this is a perfectly adequate description. It's floating against the sky. It's not laying on the ground. I can visualize the stripes. And yeah, this is good. But I would say a hot air balloon is completely appropriate alt text if you had an activity where the user had to quickly choose between a series of 5 images. And for quick identification purposes, you might describe them as a hot air balloon, a black cat, a fire hydrant, whatever your objects are that they are choosing between. Shorter alt text may help image identification if you're using them in a series like that. So if every image read a black and rainbow striped hot air balloon floats against a light blue sky, a black and white tuxedo cat rests on a desk over there, I don't know. If all of the alt text was long, you might actually end up bogging down a screen reader or other assistive technology user in the activity when you didn't actually intend to. You wanted them to make a quick identification. So again, neither one is wrong, but situationally using your alt text. Another best practice for alt text I've heard is keep it shorter than a tweet. So whatever a tweet is these days, like 240 characters or so, I'd say, 300 characters or less is probably your perfect alt text. At that point, it's not too descriptive, but keep it as concise as you need to get your point across and describe the image for someone with assistive tech. So let's try it. I have a man on a sand dune, and I think you can probably do better and give this image a bit more context for someone using assistive technology. So I'll tell you, I'm using this image in a course. It's a little e-learning module on my website for a national park, and it's a module on hiking safety. So it's a little online course people can take before they go out for their first hike that tells them about proper gear and other safety measures. So what would be the appropriate alt text for this picture in that scenario? It's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? A young man staring at the sky and sitting on a sand dune. That's a good one.
I would probably be the one to, I'm always trying to be funny. I was like staring at the sky, wondering how he's going to get down from the stand.
Right. That might be absolutely appropriate for this course. If this was, hiking safety, how to get out of, precarious situations, that might be the absolutely appropriate alt text for this is man wonders how to get down off sand dune. A man dressed for cool weather, looking toward the distant mountains. Love that one. Yeah, I've had people describe, navy blue jacket, green cap, hiking boots, facing away from the camera so that we know we're not seeing his face, facing the mountains in the distance. Yeah, it's a little challenging, but once you practice, just call out different details in an image. And one thing I always give advice is run it by someone else first before you publish it. So you wrote your alt text, great. Give it to someone else and ask if, they could picture the same thing from your alt text. So a man dressed for cool weather looking toward the distant mountains. Do I know he's sitting on a sand dune at that point? So I might have pictured something completely differently for a man dressed for cool weather looking towards distant mountains if I didn't know that he was already sitting on this sand dune. So again, making sure that you've captured any necessary details, run it past someone else, see if they kind of get the same visualization that you do. That's a really great way to practice your alt text. All right. We could vote on that. We're going to skip it in just for time here. I have a second one, little girl smiling. We're going to, again, skip this one for time. I do want to talk about some of the interactivity challenges. This is maybe where we talk drag and drops, interactions. So accessibility rules will tell you if adding things like alt text would break your survey or your questioning, if you were doing an assessment of sorts and adding alt text gives away the answer, then I would suggest we've got two activities here. We do the one without the alt text, and then we have an accessible version that then tests the same knowledge, but in a different way. And then this might get you to consider, hey, why don't we just make an accessible version for everyone? So thinking about creative ways that you can implement accessibility practices, but not in a way that invalidates learning for people. So accessibility rules will tell you if it would invalidate the exercise, then you can skip it, but that you should probably create an alternative scenario. The thing about drag and drops that always get me, I told you, someone nodded along with me here. Drag and drops can be problematic for people with limited motion. So people that need to use a keyboard only for input with their other assistive technology, don't have use of a mouse or a touch screen. A drag and drop is going to be very complicated to code in the right way. Storyline won't let you do it for keyboard access only yet. They know it's a problem. They're very good about accessibility. They're working on it. You can't build an accessible keyboard-only drag and drop without a lot of code. If you can, it's great. People have done it. I would challenge you to think about your activity and what your drag and drop is validating. So what are you assessing in real life that needs to be dragged and dropped? I use the example, a production line. Again, I worked in a factory. You may need to actually assess if someone can drag something from one area to the next. That might be part of the assessment you're doing, and you may need to see if they can drag and drop in a virtual environment before they do it in the physical environment. I would say this is a valid use of a drag and drop. You're simulating a task and then having them then go on to do the task. So you might find that someone with different assistive technology needs may not be able to complete that task at all and may need to perform a different task in the workplace. Another example someone brought up for me for this one was a news server in a fine dining establishment that needs to set the table with all of the 20 different pieces of silverware that at a fancy restaurant here. So maybe they need to drag and drop in a simulation to go then set the table out in the real environment. Again, absolutely appropriate use of drag and drops because you're simulating a physical movement. If you're just using the drag and drop to, drag a word from one place to the other, think about how you could do that accessibly instead. Could it be type the word instead of drag the word? That way someone with a keyboard could be able to complete the activity. So again, really rethink about how you're using some of the interactions that you use. Are you using them simply to create physical motion for your learner that may be inaccessible, or are you using that to kind of validate what they're doing on the job? So that's my drag and drop pet peeve there. All right. Some of the other common challenges that come up here, a lot of them that you have with documents can actually be fixed using some of the built-in tools, again, within Adobe products and Microsoft products. They have very robust accessibility checker tools. So if you're designing PDFs or Word documents or anything like that in your online learning, really get to use the accessibility features of your software. It will call out things for you like you're missing your headings in your structure, you're missing your alt text, things like that. So be aware of the accessibility features in what you're already using. Again, Storyline and Rise, super accessible. They've got a lot of accessibility resources within Articulate products. I'm not as familiar with everything else on the market, but just be aware of the things that you're creating that are interactive and how those may or may not be accessible. All right, keeping an eye on time here. I do want time for Q&A, but let's talk for a minute about evaluating what we already have. So I told you how to make it accessible from the start, but now you're thinking about, oh, that thing I designed last year may not be accessible. So what do I do now? How do I find out what I need to fix? And a lot of these are tools that you can use, again, along the way in your design process so that you're making the most accessible changes as you go. But let's talk, how are you currently, if at all, testing for accessibility right now? So if you are a developer of the training yourself, do you do any self-testing for accessibility, run things through a color contrast checker? Some people have a QA team or they hire certified testers. We do a lot of user testing, piloting, get representative audience members in to pilot our learning. And most of us say no testing yet, and that's okay. Yes, user testing, yes. So I'd say user testing is probably the most common, or self-testing. So knowing what you can use yourself as the developer designer of an online learning tool, what you can do as you go. One tool I like to use, so let's talk a disability persona. If you've ever used personas of your learners, this is very similar, but it's a profile of an example person with a disability that might be encountering your learning. So we talk about things like the nature of the limitation that they have. Is that something like deafness, or is that a cognitive disability, perhaps like dyslexia? We talk about the assistive technology that they might use. Do they use a screen reader or maybe just a text-to-speech highlighter? Do they use a magnification tool or something else that's built into their environment? How frequently do they use that assistive tech, and what's their skill level with it? These are important because it might be something they only need to use at work. So some people have maybe a physical magnifier on their monitor in the workplace to be able to better see that particular monitor, and may not need something at home. So it might be tech that's encountered only in the workplace. But again, these are all things that you can include in the profile, and then put on this hat of this disabled learner as you are designing or then evaluating your online learning. So what would that user encounter in that particular online learning? So build yourself a few profiles, a few different kinds of disabilities in assistive tech, and give it a try. Try putting on that hat the next time you're working with some online learning, and really consider the challenges that someone might face. But then these are the tools that you are going to use. These are the automated tools that you're going to want to check all of your online documents, e-learning environments with. My favorite one is this one. This is the Wave Accessibility Checker from the WebAIM organization. This is neat because it will check anything that you can do in HTML output. So anything you can open in a browser window, you can run the Wave on. And so this is your storyline output. This is your RISE module. This is even your PDF. I've gotten it to read PDFs before. Mainly built for websites, but again, useful for that e-learning environments, anything with an HTML output. This will tell you color contrast, header structure, how it's going to be really encountered by assistive tech. So this is probably like your next step before using an actual screen reader is the Wave Web Checker. It really checks for everything. Also from WebAIM is a color contrast checker. I like this one in particular because it's a bookmarklet that lives in your little browser bookmarks bar. So any website you're on, you click on it, and then it has a little color picker, and you can then pick, again, anywhere. So anything with HTML output. Your storyline course, your RISE course, your PDF, your Word document, anything you can open up in a browser, then you can then use that little browser color picker, and it will tell you contrast ratios and a clear pass-fail if it passes guidelines or fails guidelines. Hemingway, this is my favorite readability tool. So if you've never used Hemingway, it's a really fun way to make your writing more like Hemingway, the author, who has a very unique writing style, very concise, clear, crisp writing. So if you want to learn to write more like Hemingway, take a passage of your e-learning, drop it into the Hemingway app, and it will give you suggestions based on that profile. So again, lots of other readability checkers. A lot of Microsoft products and things have readability built into some of those tools. It will tell you it's at an 8th grade or a 12th grade reading level, but Hemingway is a really fun one to play with. And then if you want to try out an actual screen reader, so this is for Windows users, the NVDA screen reader. It is a free open source maintained screen reader. So donations only needed there if you find it useful. But if you want to actually try out your learning environment with a screen reader, this is a way to do it. If you're on a Mac, you have something built in called VoiceOver that is a built-in screen reader. So just get used to using VoiceOver. You don't need to download anything extra, but there are ways that you can then test your e-learning, online learning, virtual environments with that different assistive technology. All right, so I will give you a link to all of the resources here at the end. I want to spend just another minute on really making the case for accessibility. If I haven't done so already, some of you did want a little bit of help convincing others of why accessibility is important for online learning. So the first thing I told you was the statistics. I brought it into perspective for you and told you how many disabled people are actually in our workplaces and why this matters. And a lot of people connect with the statistics, but sometimes need something else. I would tie statistics to story is my best advice. Stories resonate with people. If you can find that example of what your accessibility practices helped someone with assistive technology or with a disability. Like I gave you an example of being in the factory and including those accessibility practices for the factory workers. Tell the story of how accessibility helps someone and help them put those statistics back in perspective and say that, yes, this is actually beneficial. I see the connection between what you're saying with statistics and then how these people are actually helped. We've been talked about the situational impairments, alternative formats. These are really just things that make us better designers of online learning, better facilitators of online learning. Are we really doing things like analyzing our learners' needs and evaluating if our learning really met its objectives for our learners? So thinking about accessibility through our process really makes us better at what we do. So what else do we have? Next is Q&A. So if you're thinking of a Q&A, this is your last little moment to drop it in, either the Zoom chat here or on the Menti. You can jump in. I know a couple people joined late, so maybe not in the Menti. What questions do you have about accessibility that I did not yet answer? So let's jump. Oh, no Q&A on here. Let's check the Zoom chat, or we've got a small group. We can come off mute. Let me know, what questions do you have about everything that I just told you about accessibility?
As others are thinking about their questions, I just want to say I appreciate the resources, because it never dawned on me. I know that's a terrible thing, but I did a class in 21, and I had a large group and did a breakout where they had to go around and talk to each other, and they had colored index cards. And on the screen, I had a card associated with the color and a question. And a gentleman came up to me. So when you said males are, he said, "This is great." He said, "But I'm colorblind." And I was just like, had not even considered it. So I appreciate the resources and just the reminders to think through this level of design when you're working and training.
Yeah. It can be something as simple, like you said, an activity that uses something color coded. Anything like that can be problematic. So what I've seen to help with a situation like that is doing like color and shape combo. So the pink card has a heart and the green card has a triangle or something like that. So there's multiple means of communicating that information to the participants. Good example there.
That is excellent, Yolanda, because that makes me think. I do the True Colors personality assessment, and that's all based on colors. So now that you said that about putting hearts or different symbols, that may be something that I have to incorporate into those slides that associated with each of those colors. So that's great. Thank you for that.
The way Trello does it, if you've ever used Trello, the project management board, you can color code your tasks, but if you add the colorblind filter, they will add little patterns to the colors. So blue will have stripes and red will have polka dots and green will have little V chevrons or something. So again, adding a little level of visual complexity that isn't color, that is shape or texture or something else. All right, I know we're running up on time here, so I want to make sure we get to the resources slide. I have little scenario activities. If this is a longer session, we can play with that. We can come back if you want. This is a download I will give to you with all the links on the next slide, but this is a checklist I made of like my top 20 or so practices. This is what I used to keep handy all the time before I went and wrote a book about it. So I made a book of longer checklists and things just because I'm a nerd and I needed this reference for myself. So the checklist is here. And then this is the resource page. So scan different QR code, pops you out of the Menti, goes to a Linktree page. It is also, I can drop it in the chat here, Linktree Inclusive Pixel. So this will link you to the checklist download, all of the links mentioned in the presentation. So the Diane's Toolbox video is on there. All of the Microsoft design images. Microsoft actually has a lot of accessibility training materials that I've linked to, how to download the screen reader, the color contrast checker, all of those things you can access from this Linktree. And it's also got my contact information and things. So you can go, to my website, schedule a chat with me, find me on social media. Please keep in touch with me because I love hearing about how people are taking the knowledge from this session and really making accessibility changes for their learners. So please reach out to me if you have further questions after this session. I love to keep in touch. I love to hear what you're doing. So please let's continue the conversation.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Britne. Any questions for Britne? We do have a little bit of time. We normally schedule until 1, but I know some people may have to jet out. We can take a poll and see if some of those who are here would like to see a scenario or two, or we can go ahead and wrap. So I'm flexible either way. So just let us know in the chat, or like she said, we are a small group. You can definitely.
Please come off mute and talk to me.
Yeah.
I'll come off mute. Yeah, I would love to see a scenario or two. Since I'm so new to the whole accessibility idea, the more scenarios that you give me, the more I can possibly kind of broaden my perspective of it as well. So thank you.
Yeah, here, let me back up. So, okay. We can do a quick scenario and then we'll see if anyone has any other questions after this. So first scenario I have, we have a language learning course that we need to make sure is accessible. And in this language learning course, there is audio video conferencing for learners to meet with a coach that they can learn from, practice with. There are different audio video activities where they have to upload either a video clip or audio clip of themselves saying something in that language. So a lot of audio video interaction. And I want to know, particularly, who's going to have trouble with the AV parts of this course, and what could we do about that from an accessibility perspective? Do we need to provide alternatives in some way? Do we need to consider other accessibility features that I may have mentioned? And how would we let the students know, particularly what challenges they might encounter with this course? So it's a lot of questions, a lot of things to think about. So I'll let your brain spin for a little bit. Feel free to drop anything in the Menti or the chat, or just, again, come off of mute and we can talk about it. But what would you do for accessibility in this type of course?
Forgive me if I have to ask a clarifying question. You already covered it, and I hope you don't mind if I unmute. It's a lot quicker
No,
to respond. We're a
that's
small group, if you
fine.
don't mind. So you're saying for this practice the spoken language course, is this a using audio video conferencing? There you go. Never mind. That answered the question. If I read the situation a little more closely, sorry.
Okay.
Would transcription be an appropriate tool to incorporate for accessibility for audio video conferencing?
So transcripts are going to apply to pre-recorded content. I know a lot of tools have a live running transcript, but for this situation where they are maybe uploading a finished video clip or audio clip, I would say absolutely including a transcript as part of that, requirement in the course that, hey, record yourself saying hello and your name in this language, and make sure it has captions and a transcript when you upload it. That would be absolutely a way to make this a more accessible activity.
Would alt text also be appropriate? So say, for example, you need to say, what is Spanish for the image you see on the screen, like the tree or something like that. Would that be appropriate
Absolutely.
as well?
Yeah, if there was some kind of visual reference to the activity, then absolutely including alt text. I'm thinking like we have running in Zoom and a lot of the online platforms. So depending on the platform being used for this course, you might want to enable those auto captioning tools. So if this was a live chat with a coach, with a language learner, enabling those captions is good for language learners in general, because they get the actual text readout and for pretty much mostly accurate of what's being said. I work at, my day job's a very global company, and I work with people with all kinds of accents and dialects, and the text to speech in Zoom definitely helps me get through my day. It can absolutely help someone who is hard of hearing and language learning as well.
So what about audio video conference So they're having to practice the spoken language, which means they need to input it. Would any sort of voice recognition for on the student end be something that could be incorporated? So for example, says if they cannot type, they speak into a microphone and it transcribes.
Yeah, so instead of having like text transcription, doing auto transcriptions is what you're saying, or?
Yes, if
Yeah.
a participant is unable to use a keyboard, in other
Yes.
words. Okay.
Yes, I say that's probably the rarest situation, is someone not using a keyboard. It's more often that they're not going to use a mouse or have an alternative mouse, because the fine motor movement from the hand is different. Keyboard presses can be simulated by a lot of different things. So keyboard accessibility is probably your best practice. And then if you can leave the mouse out of it, all the better.
And I don't mean to hog the conversation, so please, somebody else take over for me. I don't want to hog it.
No, hog it, go ahead. I think I'll speak for myself, but I know, what I most wanted today was just the information and how to become more cognizant and aware of design and what I need to be incorporating. So you definitely accomplished that for me. So there may be others who are a little bit further down the road who need additional help. So that's fine with me, Carrie.
And Yolanda, you hit on really what I was hoping to accomplish as well, was just getting into that mindset of making sure that I'm becoming more aware as well. Because we have a really large audience in my company.
Yeah, the bigger your audience is, that's how percentages work. Is the more
Yeah.
people you will have that have disabilities, different kinds of assistive tech and disabilities in the workplace.
All right, anyone else have any questions for Britne? Comments? Quiet group today. Well, we want to
Okay,
thank.
it's a big, heavy
for
topic
Yeah.
sometimes.
We had 22 register, but that is par for the course for virtual sessions.
For
And
sure.
we will be working on getting the recording out. We are doing that now. So check your members only section so you can get a copy to a link to past recordings. So we are moving and shaking the more that we're improving things here at our chapter. So
And I will, sorry to interrupt you, I will send over the final slides that have everyone's responses in them. So you can see how you all talked in the Menti and added all of that. So I will send over your personalized chapter slide deck at the end of the session, along with that checklist. So if you missed the download, then at least you've got the checklist for your resource library. So please share that with your members.
That would be great. And then I can include that in our event resources as well for those who registered. I also, that makes me think about, I've uploaded that, it's to YouTube, but it has closed captions, so they would be able to use those components. So something else to think about as we continue to do this. So thank you so much, Britne. Scarlett, are you at a place where you can close us out? I know Scarlett has had a very busy day already. Scarlett is our president, and recognizing that. So it looks like she's here, but may have stepped away. So I want to thank you all for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you. Our June event is coming up June 11. We have a speaker from Dale Carnegie of the Mid-South. We also have our networking event on June 13th. So be on the lookout for details regarding that. Thank you all so very much. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon.